Howdy, I'm Cedric, and today I'm going to be smacking my microphone. Oh. Howdy, I'm Cedric, and today we're going to be talking about the industrial design of the Easy Time Lapse. So it all started off as sort of a gnarly looking breadboard with all these little gizmos plugged into it. And really, this is not something that anybody can use. We can barely use this thing. So we've gone from this gnarly Frankenstein thing to this, which is our final form factor. And there's been, a little bit of work, a little bit of thought that has gone into this, and we thought we'd just give you a quick tour of that process. So when you have something like a breadboard, really the next thing you want to do is get a printed circuit board. Some people call it a PCB. We're going to call it a board. So we've got this big board that we start off with. And the purpose of this stage is just to say, hey, is this thing even feasible? So from an industrial design perspective, we needed to get it into the hands of photographers. To do that, we put all of the interaction elements on the top and all the other stuff on the bottom. And you can start to see that with this sort of more filled out board. You've got your interaction elements up top, button, feedback LED, on-off switch, and on the bottom, you've got all the other stuff. So to house this, we printed with our little Solidoodle 3D printer, which is awesome. We printed this brick-looking thing, and it's kind of like a brick with a wire coming out of it. And we put this in the hands of photographers. And, it wasn't pretty and it didn't feel good, but it worked. It allowed us to get sort of that initial, hey, this works, here are the features I like, don't like about it, etc. And one of the things that photographers told us is, hey, you got to make this thing pretty and you got to make it feel great. So we listened. And we did a lot of research. We started looking at other camera remotes, like this guy made by Shoot. You can hold it. It's fairly nice in your hands, and it triggers your camera through an IR sensor on the front. And we didn't really like this form factor because it didn't give us enough room to put some of the robust hardware that we really needed to do some really advanced shots. And so we started looking at other types of remotes. And we couldn't really find anything that we liked. So we looked in places that don't have remotes, places like art supply stores, and we found this fabulous eraser. It felt great in our hands, it had a fun color scheme, and it actually had a nice button. We kind of liked the way that button felt. So we borrowed some of our favorite elements from this eraser, and we actually used it to make an early prototype of our enclosure. You can see the similarities in colors and sort of has a similar sort of chubbiness to it. And it feels great in your hand. Whenever you're making your final enclosure, one of the big considerations is how small can it potentially be? And the insides affect the outsides. So on the insides, you have your board. And our board had to go from being this big to being this big. Now, it's not in yet. It'll be coming in next week, but we'll show it off once it is. But that's a pretty huge, pretty small difference. So to go from here to here, our electrical engineer did something called miniaturization, and that's allowed us to go to a much smaller form factor. On the insides of this prototype, we initially started with a U design, where you'd have sort of a one-piece back body that would snap in to the front, but that really didn't let us maximize the amount of space on the PCB. We had a couple of spots in here that were really just taking up a lot of space, so we had to dream up a better solution. And after a lot of hard work and thinking, we developed what we call a backbone. So we have this structure here where you've got your board up top, some support rods in the bottom, and it all snaps right in to a skin. Now, the reason that we did this is because we're makers and we wanted to make this device as maker-friendly as possible. So when you pop it open, you have access to everything right away. You've got access to the board. If you want to plug in and play with it, you've got access to batteries, and it just looks great. So this is just a 3D printed prototype, but in our next update, we'll show you what it actually looks like with the board inside of it. Let's see if I can get this guy to work. So yeah, that's our final form factor and the story of how we got there. Thanks for coming and watching our video. Subscribe and follow us as we continue to make this little time-lapse device more and more real. All right, cheers.